The stars had always seemed so peaceful from Earth. Humanity looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what might be out there. They built telescopes and satellites, sent radio signals into the void, and waited for someone to answer. When the answer finally came, it was not what anyone expected. The Zalthari Empire had ruled a large section of the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had powerful weapons, massive ships, and armies that had conquered over 200 different alien species. Their technology was so advanced that most species surrendered without even fighting. The Zalthari were used to winning. They were used to being feared. They had never lost a war. When their scout ships detected radio signals coming from a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, they sent probes to investigate. What they found made them laugh. The humans of Earth had barely left their own planet. They had primitive rockets, simple satellites, and weapons that seemed like toys compared to Zalthari technology. The humans had no shields to protect their cities. They had no plasma cannons or laser weapons. They could not even travel faster than light. Commander Vexthor was assigned to handle the conquest of Earth. He was an experienced officer who had overseen the subjugation of 15 different species. Earth would be his 16th victory, and he expected it to be the easiest one yet. He looked at the intelligence reports with barely hidden contempt. These humans were children playing with fire. They would learn their place soon enough. On Earth, it was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. President Margaret Cole was in the White House having breakfast when her security team rushed in. Something had appeared in the sky over every major city on the planet. Giant holographic images, hundreds of feet tall, showing an alien face with dark purple skin and 4 yellow eyes. The message was simple and terrifying. The face spoke in perfect English, and somehow everyone on Earth could understand it in their own language. The Zalthari Empire had claimed Earth. Humanity now belonged to them. The humans had 1 week to surrender completely. They would destroy their weapons, submit to Zalthari rule, and accept their new place as servants of the Empire. If they refused, the Zalthari would destroy every city on Earth and kill billions of people. The choice was simple: obey or die. President Cole sat in the Situation Room deep beneath the White House. Around her were the most powerful leaders in the military and government. Secretary of Defense Henry Blake was already arguing for surrender. "We can't fight them," he said, his voice shaking. "Look at what they have. Ships that can cross the galaxy, weapons that can destroy planets. We have nothing that can stop them." General Frank Porter, the highest-ranking military officer in the United States, disagreed. "We don't know what they have," he said calmly. "We only know what they've shown us. And showing a hologram is easy. Actually invading Earth is much harder." "They've conquered 200 species," Henry shot back. "What makes you think we're different?" "Because we're human," Frank replied. "And humans don't kneel." President Cole listened to them argue for an hour. She knew Henry was probably right. The technological gap seemed impossible to overcome. But she also knew Frank was right about something else. Humanity had never been good at surrendering, even when they should. Dr. Lisa Monroe sat quietly in the corner of the room. She was the president's chief science advisor, and she had been reading reports on her tablet for the entire meeting. Finally, she spoke up. "Madam President, I need 24 hours before we make any decisions." Margaret looked at her. "Why?" "Because there are things we've been working on," Lisa said carefully. "Programs that most people don't know about. Projects that were kept secret for security reasons. I need time to find out exactly what we have." The president nodded. "You have 24 hours. But Lisa, be honest with me. Do we have any chance at all?" Lisa looked her in the eye. "Maybe. If we're willing to do things we never thought we'd have to do." All around the world, people were panicking. The streets were filled with protesters, with people praying, with people fighting over supplies. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight no matter what. Most just wanted someone to tell them everything would be okay. But deep underground, in secret facilities that didn't appear on any map, other things were happening. Dr. Lisa Monroe made phone calls to people whose names were classified. She accessed files that required 4 different passwords and a retinal scan. She spoke to scientists and engineers who had been working on projects with strange names like Prometheus and Aegis and Olympus. Captain Jake Morrison was sleeping in his quarters at a military base when his phone rang at 3 a.m. He was a test pilot, one of the best in the world. He had flown experimental aircraft that the public wouldn't see for another decade, When he answered, the voice on the other end gave him a code word that made his blood run cold. It was the code that meant everything had changed. "Report to Hangar 7 immediately," the voice said. "Bring your flight suit." This is not a drill. Jake got dressed and drove through the dark to a part of the base he had only been to twice before. Hangar 7 was where they kept the things that officially didn't exist. When he arrived, he found 30 other pilots already there. All of them looked confused and worried. A Colonel Jake didn't recognize stepped forward. "Gentlemen, ladies, you all know by now about our visitors. What you don't know is that we have a way to fight back. In this hangar are aircraft that use technology we've kept secret for 20 years. They're not as advanced as what the aliens have, but they're a lot better than what the rest of the world thinks we have." The colonel pressed a button and the lights came on. Jake's jaw dropped. The machines in the hangar looked like something from a science fiction movie. They were sleek and angular, with engines that didn't look like any jet engines he'd ever seen. "These are orbital fighters," the colonel continued. "They can operate in space. They're armed with weapons that can punch through most known materials. And starting tomorrow, you're going to learn how to fly them. Because in 1 week, we're either going to surrender to aliens, or we're going to show them that humans don't go down without a fight." Back in Washington, Dr. Lisa Monroe briefed President Cole on what humanity actually had hidden away. There were weapon systems that had been built in secret, tested in secret, and kept secret because no one wanted other countries to know they existed. There were research programs that had been developing new technologies for decades. There were plans for fighting enemies that didn't exist yet. "We've been preparing for threats we couldn't even imagine," Lisa explained. "Some of these projects started during the Cold War. Others are more recent. But all of them were designed around one principle: humanity needs to be ready for anything." President Cole looked at the files Lisa had brought. Energy shields that actually worked, at least on a small scale. Railguns that could fire projectiles at incredible speeds. Satellites with weapons that could hit targets anywhere on Earth or in near orbit. None of it was as good as what the aliens probably had. But it was much better than nothing. "Why didn't anyone tell me about this before?" Margaret asked. "Because the program is compartmentalized," Lisa replied. "Even the Secretary of Defense doesn't know about all of it. These projects are spread across different agencies and different countries. We kept them separate so that no one could compromise everything at once. But now we need to bring it all together." The president made her decision. "Do it, bring it all online. Contact our allies and tell them we're not surrendering. Tell them we're going to fight. And God help us all, because we're about to find out if humanity is as tough as we think we are." In orbit around Earth, Commander Vexthor watched and waited. He had moved his fleet into position just beyond the moon. 300 warships, each one capable of destroying a city with a single shot. He was confident and relaxed. In 6 days, the humans would surrender. They had no choice. Every species eventually realized that fighting the Zalthari Empire was suicide. What he didn't know was that down on Earth, humans were doing what they did best. They were preparing for war. The Zalthari were confused when Earth's response arrived. Commander Vexithor had expected either immediate surrender or silence followed by surrender. Instead, the humans sent a diplomatic message. They wanted to meet face to face. They wanted to discuss terms. Vexthor found this amusing. He would graciously accept their surrender in person and make them understand their new place in the galaxy. He ordered his flagship, the Eternal Glory, to enter Earth's orbit. Behind him came 300 warships, spread out in a formation designed to be visible from the ground. The display was meant to inspire absolute terror. It was meant to show humanity that resistance was pointless. It was meant to break their will before the fighting even started. On Earth, in command centers buried deep underground, humans watched the alien fleet arrive. In Houston, in Moscow, in Beijing, in London, in New Delhi, military officers looked at their screens and calculated. For the first time in human history, every major nation was working together. Old enemies became allies in ours. The reason was simple. Humans might fight each other constantly, but they absolutely refused to bow to anyone else. Admiral Frank Porter sat in the United Earth Defense Command Center, which had been built in just 4 days by combining resources from 20 different countries. Around him were generals and admirals from nations that had been enemies just a week ago. Now they shared information freely. Now they planned together. The threat from above had done what centuries of diplomacy could not. "They think this is over already," Frank said, watching the alien ships take up positions. They think we're terrified, aren't we? Asked a Chinese general. Frank smiled. Terrified? Yes. Beaten? No, there's a difference. Dr. Lisa Monroe continued her briefings. She showed the military leadership exactly what humanity had been hiding. The projects had names that sounded like ancient myths. Prometheus was an energy weapon system. Aegis was a defensive shield network. Olympus was a kinetic bombardment platform. There were others, dozens of them, each one designed by humans who had asked themselves a simple question. What if we needed to fight someone stronger than us? The thing people forget about humans, Lisa explained to a room full of officers, is that we've spent our entire existence fighting things that were bigger and stronger than us. We didn't become the dominant species on Earth because we were the fastest or the strongest. We became dominant because we learned to think, to plan, and to use tools. We learned to work together. We learned to never give up. The diplomatic shuttle carrying Commander Vexthor landed at a secure facility in Nevada. He stepped out expecting to see primitive buildings and frightened humans. Instead, he found a modern complex that looked reasonably advanced. He was greeted by Ambassador Kate Sullivan, who had been specially chosen for this meeting. Kate had spent 20 years in the Marine Corps before becoming a diplomat. She had fought in 3 wars and earned medals for bravery. She knew how to stay calm under pressure. More importantly, she knew how to smile while thinking about violence. Welcome to Earth, Commander, she said warmly, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Vexthor looked at her hand with confusion. His species didn't touch strangers. Kate lowered her hand smoothly, not showing any embarrassment. Before we discuss your terms for our surrender, she said, I'd like to show you around. We believe it's important that you understand who we are. Vexthor agreed, expecting to see primitive technology and desperate people. Instead, Kate took him on a tour that gradually made him more and more uncomfortable. First, she showed him a university where human students were studying advanced physics. The equations on their boards were similar to theories the Zalthari had developed centuries ago. The humans had figured out the same things on their own. Then she took him to a research facility where humans were experimenting with energy fields. We call it plasma containment, Kate explained. We've been working on fusion reactors for decades. We can't quite make them efficient enough for widespread use yet, but we're close. Another 10 years maybe. Vexthor said nothing. Fusion technology had taken the Zalthari 500 years to develop. These humans were doing it on their own without anyone teaching them. The next stop was a weapons testing range in the desert. Kate showed him railguns firing projectiles at hypersonic speeds. She showed him missiles that could change direction in mid-flight. She showed him drones that could operate autonomously in combat situations. We've spent a lot of time learning how to destroy things, she said pleasantly. Humans are very good at it. Why? Vexthor asked. Why develop such weapons when you have no enemies in space? Kate smiled. Because we had enemies right here. For most of our history, humans have been at war with each other. Different nations, different ideologies, different religions. We've fought over land, resources, and ideas. We've developed thousands of different ways to kill each other. Then about 50 years ago, we decided to stop. Or at least to fight less. All that creativity, all that energy, all those resources we'd been using to fight each other. We had to aim them somewhere else. She led him into a command center where humans were coordinating the defense of their planet. Vexthor saw technology that shouldn't exist. Quantum computers that could calculate thousands of scenarios per second. Communication systems that couldn't be jammed. Satellite networks that covered every inch of the planet. The thing is, Commander, Kate said quietly, you made an assumption about us. You saw that we were confined to one planet, and you assumed we were weak. You thought we were primitive, but we weren't confined here because we couldn't leave. We were confined here because we were too busy fighting each other. Now that we've stopped fighting each other, we've focused all that energy on getting ready for threats from outside. Vexthor's tactical officer, who had been following the tour, leaned close and whispered in his ear, Sir, some of this technology is more advanced than our intelligence report suggested. They shouldn't have developed these things on their own. Kate heard the whisper. Her smile grew wider. Your intelligence was based on what we let you see. We've been broadcasting radio and television signals into space for a century, but we've been building other things in secret, things we didn't want anyone to know about. She brought up a holographic display showing Earth's military capabilities. Vexthor's eyes widened as he saw the numbers. Thousands of aircraft, hundreds of ships, millions of soldiers. nuclear weapons by the thousands, and beneath it all the secret programs that even most humans didn't know about. "We have a saying on Earth," Kate said. "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst." We've been hoping we were alone in the universe, but we've been preparing in case we weren't. Vexthor tried to maintain his composure. "Your technology is still inferior to ours. Your ships cannot leave your solar system. Your weapons are primitive compared to what the Empire possesses. Surrender is still your only logical choice." Kate nodded thoughtfully. "You're probably right about the technology. Your ships are faster. Your weapons are more powerful. On paper, you should win easily." She paused. "But wars aren't fought on paper, Commander. They're fought by soldiers and sailors and pilots who bleed and die, and humans are very, very good at bleeding and dying for things we believe in." She brought up historical footage, videos of human soldiers in combat, footage of battles where humans were outnumbered and outgunned but kept fighting anyway, images of cities that had been bombed flat but where humans continued to resist. "We've been fighting wars for thousands of years," Kate explained. "We've learned a lot about how to win them. We've also learned a lot about how to make our enemies regret starting them." Vexthor was beginning to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: doubt. These humans were not behaving like any species he'd conquered before. They weren't begging for mercy. They weren't trying to negotiate for better terms of surrender. They were showing him their weapons and telling him they were ready to fight. "Let me be very clear," Kate said, her smile finally fading. "We don't want a war. We don't want billions of people to die. But we also won't surrender our freedom without a fight. You came to our planet and threatened us. You gave us 1 week to give up everything we are. Did you really think we would just accept that?" "Every other species has," Vexthor replied. "Then you've never met anyone like us before," Kate said. "Commander, I'm going to be honest with you. If we fight, we'll probably lose. You have better technology and more ships, but we'll make you pay for every inch of ground, every city, every life. And when it's over, when you've finally beaten us, you'll have lost so many ships and so many soldiers that your empire will be weakened. Other species you've conquered will see that the mighty Zalthari can bleed. They'll start to wonder if they can fight back too." She let that sink in. "So here's our counteroffer. Leave. Go back to your empire and tell them Earth is not worth the cost. Tell them we're willing to talk, to trade, to be friends. But tell them we will never be servants, never." Vexthor returned to his ship troubled and uncertain. He reported everything to the Imperial Command. Their response was predictable. The humans were bluffing. They were trying to scare the Zalthari into leaving without a fight. Begin the invasion as planned. Humanity would learn its place. The Zalthari Empire had very specific rules about how to conduct warfare. These rules had been developed over thousands of years and hundreds of conquests. First, establish orbital superiority by destroying any satellites or space stations. Second, demonstrate overwhelming force by destroying a military target. Third, demand surrender again. Fourth, begin systematic occupation. It was a process that had worked perfectly on 200 different worlds. Commander Vexthor ordered his fleet to begin the invasion of Earth. He selected his first target carefully. Intelligence had identified an island in the middle of the ocean with what appeared to be a naval base. The island was isolated, far from any major population centers. Destroying it would demonstrate Zalthari power without killing too many civilians. It would be a warning shot that would make humanity understand their situation. What Vexthor didn't know was that the island was Diego Garcia, and it was much more important than it appeared. It was a key military facility that had been heavily fortified in the days since the Zalthari arrival. More importantly, it was now being used as bait. The moment the Zalthari ships powered up their weapons, alarms went off in command centers all over Earth. Admiral Frank Porter, sitting in the underground facility that now served as Earth's military headquarters, saw the targeting data appear on his screens. The aliens were finally attacking. Everything humanity had prepared for was about to be tested. "All stations weapons free," Frank ordered calmly. "Let's show them what happens when you pick a fight with Earth." Lieutenant Amy Foster was stationed at Aegis Control, buried 3 miles beneath the Rocky Mountains. Her console lit up with targeting solutions that had been calculated by quantum computers in microseconds. She had trained for this moment for 2 years, but nothing could really prepare someone for actual combat against aliens. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the controls. "Steady, Lieutenant," her commanding officer said. "Just like the simulations." Amy took a deep breath and activated the system. Aegis network online. Defensive shields at full power. The Zalthari fired their particle beam weapons at Diego Garcia. Streams of superheated plasma crossed the distance in seconds, carrying enough energy to vaporize everything on the island. But the beams never reached the ground. They hit an invisible barrier 200 feet above the island and scattered into harmless light. On his flagship, Vexthor stared at his screens in disbelief. "What is that?" "Energy shield, sir," his tactical officer reported, voice tight with shock. "They have functioning energy shields. That's impossible. The intelligence report said they had no such technology." "The intelligence reports were wrong, sir." Before Vexthor could process this information, Earth struck back. All across the planet, hidden silos opened up. Railguns that had been built in secret, using technology humanity had developed by studying physics and engineering, began to fire. They didn't use energy or explosives. They used pure kinetic force, launching solid projectiles at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The Zalthari shields were designed to deflect or absorb energy weapons. They were very good at it, but they did nothing against solid matter moving at relativistic velocities. The projectiles simply punched through the shields as if they weren't there and kept going. 12 Zalthari warships were hit in the first volley. The impacts released as much energy as nuclear explosions, but without the radiation. The ships didn't just suffer damage. They ceased to exist, torn apart by forces their designers had never anticipated. "Evasive maneuvers," Vexthor shouted. "All ships scatter formation." But the humans weren't done. From bases on the moon, which the Zalthari hadn't known existed, more railguns opened fire. From orbital platforms hidden among Earth's satellites, missiles launched. From the planet's surface, thousands of conventional weapons reached toward space. Captain Jake Morrison led a squadron of 50 experimental fighters into orbit. He had been training on the new spacecraft for only 5 days. But he was one of the best pilots humanity had. His fighter used chemical rockets enhanced with technology that combined human engineering with theories that had once been purely academic. The ship wasn't as fast as Zalthari craft, but it was fast enough. "Listen up," Jake said over the squadron channel. "These aliens have been cruising around the galaxy beating up on species that don't fight back. Time to show them what happens when someone punches back. Remember your training and watch each other's backs." The human fighters engaged the Zalthari ships in Earth orbit. The aliens had better technology and more experience. Their ships could accelerate faster, and their weapons were more powerful. But they had never fought an enemy like this before. They had conquered species that surrendered quickly, that tried to negotiate, that gave up when they realized they couldn't win. Humans didn't give up. When a human fighter was damaged, the pilot would try to ram the nearest enemy ship before ejecting. When ammunition ran low, pilots would use their ships as weapons. When the odds were impossible, humans would laugh and attack anyway. Zalthari tactics were based on efficiency and minimal casualties. Human tactics were based on winning no matter the cost. It was a fundamental difference that the aliens hadn't understood until now. "They're insane," a Zalthari pilot screamed over the command channel. "They're damaged and they're still attacking." Vexthor watched the battle unfold with growing horror. His fleet had numerical superiority. His technology was better. By every logical measure, he should be winning easily. Instead, he was losing ships at an alarming rate. The humans were fighting with a ferocity that seemed impossible. A human fighter, trailing smoke and clearly dying, accelerated directly toward a Zalthari cruiser. The cruiser's weapons tore the small craft apart, but the debris kept coming, hitting the larger ship's engines at high speed. Both craft exploded. "They're trading 1 for 1, Vexthor's tactical officer reported. "Our ships are worth 10 of theirs, but they don't care. They're willing to trade unfavorably just to hurt us." On Earth, the battle was being broadcast to every screen on the planet. People watched as their fighters died in space. They watched as Zalthari ships exploded. They cried and they cheered and they prayed. But most of all, they hoped. President Margaret Cole sat in the Situation Room watching the same images. Every casualty report felt like a knife in her heart. These were her people dying up there. But they were dying to protect Earth, and that meant something. "Casualty report?" she asked quietly. General Frank Porter consulted his tablet. "We've lost 42 ground installations, 38,000 personnel, and 21 fighters so far. The Zalthari have lost 90 ships." Margaret closed her eyes. 38,000 dead, 38,000 families destroyed. "And we're winning?" "We're surviving," Frank corrected, "which is more than they expected." The battle for Earth's orbital space lasted 6 hours. When it finally ended, both sides retreated to regroup. The Zelthari pulled back beyond the moon. The human fighters returned to Earth, those that could still fly. Jake Morrison landed his fighter at the base with almost no fuel and half his systems offline. When he climbed out of the cockpit, his hands were shaking. He had shot down 3 alien ships and watched 12 of his squadron mates die. He sat on the ground and cried, not from fear but from exhaustion and grief and relief at being alive. All over Earth, similar scenes played out. Pilots and soldiers and sailors who had just fought the first battle in a war for humanity's survival. Some celebrated their victories. Some mourned their losses. Most did both. In space, Commander Vexthor assessed his situation. He had lost 90 ships out of 300. Nearly a third of his fleet was gone. He had achieved none of his objectives. The humans still controlled their orbital space. They still had their defensive systems online. They were hurt, but they weren't beaten. He sent a message to the Zelthari High Command explaining what had happened. Their response came quickly. Reinforcements were being sent. 3,000 additional ships would arrive within 10 days. In the meantime, maintain position and prevent the humans from recovering. Vexthor read the message and felt a cold certainty in his stomach. 3,000 ships. The Empire was sending a force larger than most full-scale invasions. They were taking Earth seriously now. But Vexthor wondered if even 3,000 ships would be enough. On Earth, Dr. Lisa Monroe briefed the military leadership on what had been learned from the battle. Their shields don't stop kinetic weapons, she explained. Our railguns are effective. Their ships are faster, but our pilots are better at three-dimensional combat. They have more firepower, but we're willing to take more risks. What's our chance of winning a longer war? President Cole asked. Lisa hesitated. Against 300 ships? We might have lasted another week. Against 3,000? We need a different strategy. What kind of strategy? Admiral Porter asked. We need to make them understand who we are, Lisa said. They think we're just another primitive species. They don't understand that Earth is different, that humans are different. We need to teach them a lesson they'll never forget. Kate Sullivan, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. They think technology determines outcomes. They've never fought anyone who fights the way we do, so we don't fight their kind of war. We fight our kind of war. 10 days passed in an uneasy standoff. The Zelthari fleet remained beyond the moon, and Earth's defenders watched and waited. Both sides used the time to prepare. The Zelthari repaired their damaged ships and studied the human tactics, trying to understand how primitives had inflicted such losses. The humans buried their dead, repaired what they could, and made plans that would have seemed insane if anyone had time to think about them rationally. Dr. Lisa Monroe gave a presentation to Earth's military leaders that changed how they understood themselves. She had been researching something called the Deathworld classification system, a theoretical framework that scientists had developed for categorizing planets by how hostile they were to life. Earth is a Class 12 deathworld, Lisa explained, showing images of their planet from space. That means it's one of the most hostile environments for life in the theoretical spectrum. Most alien species evolved on worlds much more gentle than ours. Major Ben Carter, who commanded what was now being called the Marine Space Division, looked confused. But Earth is perfect for us. How can it be hostile? Perfect for us, Lisa emphasized. But consider what Earth actually is. We have gravity that's significantly stronger than most habitable worlds. Our atmosphere contains oxygen, which is highly corrosive to many forms of chemistry. Our weather patterns are violent, with hurricanes, tornadoes, and storms that would terrify species from calmer worlds. We have earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis. Our oceans are filled with salt water that's toxic to drink. And every single form of life on Earth evolved by competing with every other form of life. She brought up images of Earth's predators, lions hunting in packs, sharks patrolling the oceans, eagles diving from the sky. Humans didn't just survive on this planet. We dominated it. We climbed to the top of the food chain on a world that was actively trying to kill us every single day. Admiral Frank Porter was beginning to understand. You're saying the Zelthari come from easier worlds? Much easier, Lisa confirmed. She showed data that had been extracted from captured Zelthari equipment. Their homeworld has 0.78 Earth gravity. That's 22% less than what we live in. Their atmosphere is thinner and contains less oxygen. They have fewer predators and less violent weather. They evolved as herd animals who developed technology. They're smart and organized, but they've never had to fight for survival the way we have. Colonel Deborah Hayes, who commanded the Orbital Defense Network, smiled grimly. So we're tougher than them. Much tougher, Lisa said. A human soldier in Earth gravity can move faster and hit harder than a Zalthari soldier in the same environment. Our pilots can tolerate acceleration and maneuvers that would kill them. We can survive injuries that would be fatal to their species. We can operate in conditions that would incapacitate them. It's not just physical, she continued. It's psychological. Humans are persistence hunters. We evolved by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We don't give up. We don't know how. And we've spent 10,000 years fighting each other, developing strategies and tactics and weapons. War is in our history. It's part of who we are. Ben Carter stood up, his grin widening. So what you're saying is that they picked a fight with the wrong species? Exactly, Lisa replied. They thought technology determined outcomes. They didn't understand that humans are predators from a death world. We're not supposed to be this dangerous. By their standards, we shouldn't even exist. The military leadership began planning with this new understanding. If humans were more physically capable than the Zalthari, they could use that advantage. If human pilots could tolerate more stress, they could fly more aggressively. If human soldiers were tougher, they could fight in ways the aliens wouldn't expect. The Zalthari reinforcements arrived on schedule. 3,000 ships, representing 10% of the entire Imperial fleet. It was a massive show of force. Fleet Admiral Drakon took command, replacing Vexthor, who had been demoted for losing so many ships in the first battle. Drakon was a veteran of dozens of campaigns and had personally overseen the conquest of 12 species. He reviewed the battle data from the first engagement and dismissed it as an aberration. The humans had been lucky, and Vexthor had been incompetent. It wouldn't happen again. President Margaret Cole addressed the United Nations and the world. The message was broadcast on every channel, translated into every language. People of Earth, we face an enemy that wants to conquer us, to make us slaves. They have more ships and better technology, but they made a mistake. They assumed we would be easy to beat. They assumed we would surrender without a real fight. They don't understand who we are. She paused, looking directly into the camera. We are humanity. We are the species that conquered Earth, the most hostile environment imaginable. We are the descendants of survivors who faced down predators, disasters, and countless threats. We have fought wars for thousands of years and learned from every one of them. We don't surrender. We don't give up. And we will show these aliens that threatening Earth was the worst mistake they ever made. The speech was met with cheers in some places, silence in others. Everyone knew what was coming. The real battle, the one that would decide everything, was about to begin. Fleet Admiral Drakon implemented his strategy with confidence. He divided his massive fleet into 3 groups and attacked from different directions simultaneously. One group targeted North America, another targeted Europe and Asia, and the third targeted military installations in the Pacific. The plan was to overwhelm Earth's defenses by forcing them to defend everywhere at once. It was sound strategy, proven over centuries of warfare. What he didn't account for was that humans didn't fight defensively when their backs were against the wall. They attacked. Captain Jake Morrison volunteered for a mission that military command labeled as suicide before approving it. 50 human pilots would load their fighters with every explosive, every missile, every weapon they could carry. Then they would fly at maximum speed directly into the center of the Zalthari fleet. They weren't trying to win a dogfight. They were turning themselves into guided bombs. "This is crazy," one of the pilots said during the briefing. "Absolutely," Jake agreed. "It's also our best chance. We can't match them ship for ship, but we can hurt them badly enough that they'll think twice about coming back." The 50 pilots launched from bases around the world. They didn't try to hide or use tactics. They simply pointed their ships at the Zalthari fleet and accelerated as hard as they could. The alien point defense system shot down some of them, but not all. Not enough. Jake Morrison's ship, the Defiant, punched through a Zalthari carrier's bridge at 18 kilometers per second. His last transmission was simple. For Earth. For humanity. We don't give up. 49 other pilots said similar things as their ships crashed into alien vessels. 50 human pilots died to destroy or cripple 50 Zalthari capital ships. The exchange rate was terrible from a military standpoint. It was glorious from a human perspective. Admiral Porter watched the sacrifice and immediately ordered the next phase. Activate Olympus. All stations fire at will. Project Olympus had been the most controversial of the secret programs. It violated international treaties about weapons in space. It had been built anyway because some people believed that rules didn't matter if humanity was fighting for survival. Kinetic bombardment satellites, railguns on the moon, and mass drivers hidden on asteroids all fired at once. The Zalthari fleet found itself caught in a storm of metal moving at relativistic speeds. Hundreds of ships were disabled or destroyed in minutes. Their shields meant nothing against projectiles that hit with the force of nuclear weapons. But the aliens still had thousands of ships. Drakon ordered them to spread out and begin systematic bombardment of Earth's military installations. Some of his ships managed to reach the planet's surface, landing in South America where they encountered minimal space-based resistance. The Zalthari ground forces deployed, expecting to fight defenders armed with primitive weapons. They had energy rifles, powered armor, and air support. The humans had conventional weapons and determination. On paper, it shouldn't have been a contest. Colonel Deborah Hayes led the defense of the landing zone. Her troops were Marines, soldiers who specialized in close combat. They wore body armor that had been hastily upgraded with whatever technology could be adapted in the available time. They carried rifles that were literally hundreds of years less advanced than what the Zalthari had. The first engagement lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the Zalthari had retreated to their landing craft and left. They had superior weapons and armor. They had air support and better communications, but they lost. The reason was simple. The Zalthari troops were fighting in Earth gravity, which made them slower and weaker. They were breathing Earth air, which was too rich in oxygen for optimal performance. They were facing enemies who had evolved to fight and survive in these exact conditions. Human soldiers could move faster, fight longer, and endure more damage. When Zalthari armor was penetrated, the aliens inside died quickly. When human armor was penetrated, the humans would often keep fighting. More than that, humans fought with a ferocity that the Zalthari had never encountered. They used tactics that seemed insane. They would pretend. 3 weeks after the war began, Fleet Admiral Drakon faced a reality that no Zalthari commander had confronted in 300 years. He was losing. Not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly and inevitably. His fleet had started with 3,300 ships. He now had less than 2,000 operational. The humans were hurt badly, their casualties in the millions, but they were still fighting. More importantly, they showed no signs of ever stopping. The mathematics were simple and brutal. At the HFY current rate of attrition, the Zalthari would run out of ships before the humans ran out of will to fight. Drakon could win every battle and still lose the war because humans seemed willing to trade 10 lives for 1 alien life, and Earth had billions of humans. He called a meeting with his senior officers. They were exhausted and demoralized. The Zalthari military had been built on the expectation of quick victories against compliant enemies. This grinding war of attrition was something they had no experience with. Options, Drakon demanded. We could use weapons of mass destruction, one officer suggested. Bombardment from orbit, destroy their major cities and force them to surrender. And kill billions? Another officer asked. The Empire doesn't want a dead world. We want a conquered one. Resources and slaves, not a graveyard. Then we continue as we are, a third officer said. And lose more ships every day, Drakon replied. No, I won't sacrifice the entire fleet for a planet that's proving more trouble than it's worth. The room fell silent. What he was suggesting was unthinkable. The Zalthari Empire didn't retreat. It didn't admit defeat, but it also didn't usually face enemies like humanity. On Earth, exhaustion was setting in. The orbital battles continued daily. Cities had been damaged. Millions were dead. Resources were running low. But something had changed in humanity. The fear from the first day was gone, replaced by grim determination. People no longer asked if they could win. They simply accepted that they would fight until they couldn't fight anymore. President Margaret Cole hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since the war started. She had aged years and weeks. But she stood before the world's leaders with her head high. "We've proven we can hurt them," she said. "Now we need to prove we can outlast them." Dr. Lisa Monroe had been analyzing Zalthari communication intercepts. The aliens weren't using encryption that human quantum computers couldn't break. "They're arguing among themselves," she reported. "Some want to continue the war. Others want to withdraw. They've never fought a war this costly before." "How much longer can we hold?" President Cole asked Admiral Porter directly. Frank looked at his casualty reports and resource assessments before answering honestly. "Another month, maybe 2. After that, we'll have exhausted our ammunition reserves and lost too many trained personnel. We'll still have people willing to fight, but we won't have the means to hurt them enough to matter." "And them? They could keep bombing us for months, but they'd lose most of their fleet doing it, and they'd have nothing to show for it except a ruined planet. The question is whether they're willing to accept that cost." The answer came 3 days later. A Zalthari diplomatic ship approached Earth under a white flag, a human symbol they had learned. The message was simple. Fleet Admiral Drakon wanted to discuss terms. Ambassador Kate Sullivan met with the Zalthari delegation at a neutral location, a space station that had been hastily constructed in orbit for this purpose. Across from her sat Drakon himself and 3 other high-ranking officers. They looked tired, she noted with satisfaction. Good. They should be tired. "The Empire is prepared to offer generous terms," Drakon began. "You will be granted autonomy within the Empire. No occupation forces, no tribute. You will govern yourselves, but acknowledge Zalthari's sovereignty over this region of space." "No," Kate said simply. "No?" Drakon looked confused. "You reject peace?" "I reject your terms," Kate clarified. "Here are our terms. The Zalthari Empire will withdraw all forces from Earth's solar system. You will classify Earth as a restricted zone and prohibit any Zalthari ships from entering without permission. You will acknowledge that Earth is an independent world with sovereign rights, and you will pay reparations for the damage you've caused." Drakon's skin changed color, a Zalthari sign of anger. "You're in no position to make demands. We still have 2,000 ships. And we still have 5 billion people willing to die fighting you," Kate replied calmly. "Admiral, let me explain something about humans that you still don't understand. We don't surrender. It's not that we won't. We literally don't know how. You can kill all of us, but you can't make us stop fighting. And every day this war continues, you lose ships you can't easily replace. How long before other species you've conquered realize that the mighty Zalthari Empire can be beaten?" That struck home. Kate could see it in how the Zalthari officers looked at each other. That was their real fear. Not that they couldn't eventually destroy Earth, but that being seen to struggle against humans would encourage rebellion elsewhere. "We want peace," Kate continued, her tone softening slightly. "We never wanted this war, but we'll only accept peace as equals, not as subjects. Walk away now while you still can. Or keep fighting and watch your empire crumble when others realize you're not invincible." The negotiations took another week. In the end, the Zalthari agreed to most of Earth's terms. They withdrew their fleet from the solar system. They classified Earth as what they called a protected deathworld, a designation that meant other species were warned away. They didn't pay reparations, but they did agree to share some basic technologies as a gesture of goodwill. President Cole announced the peace treaty to a world that wasn't sure whether to celebrate or cry. The war was over. Earth had survived. But the cost had been terrible. 3 million dead, dozens of cities damaged, and the certain knowledge that humanity was no longer alone in a friendly universe. 6 months after the war ended, Ambassador Kate Sullivan met with a Zalthari scholar named Tevrin, who had been sent to Earth to study what had happened. He wanted to understand how a primitive species had fought the Empire to a standstill. "You asked me once why we fought so hard," Kate said, sitting across from him in a cafe in New York. Around them, humans went about their lives, rebuilding and recovering. "I didn't really answer you then. Let me try now." She pulled up images on her tablet. Pictures of Earth's history. Ancient battles, medieval sieges, modern warfare. "This is who we are," she explained. "For our entire existence we've been fighting. Fighting each other, fighting nature, fighting for survival on a planet that was actively hostile to life. We developed weapons and strategies and tactics over thousands of years. We built empires and destroyed them. We created art and literature about war because it was so central to our existence." She showed him images of human warriors throughout history. Spartans at Thermopylae, soldiers landing on beaches during World War II, firefighters running into burning buildings on September 11th. "We have stories about people who fought impossible odds. We celebrate them. We teach our children about them. Not because we love war, but because fighting against impossible odds is part of our cultural identity." Tevrin studied the images carefully. "You're saying that war is natural to you?" "Not natural," Kate corrected. "Cultural. We learned it. And then about 70 years ago, something amazing happened. We started to unlearn it. We began to realize that fighting each other was pointless when we could work together. But all that energy, all that creativity we'd used to fight each other for thousands of years, we had to direct it somewhere, so we directed it outward. We prepared for threats that didn't exist yet. And then we arrived," Tevrin said quietly. "And then you arrived," Kate agreed. "You gave us a common enemy. Every nation, every culture, every person on Earth suddenly had a reason to work together. You united us in a way nothing else ever could. And all that creativity, all that military tradition, all those weapons and tactics we'd developed, we focused all of it on you." She leaned back in her chair. "You made a simple mistake, Tevrin. You assumed that because we hadn't left our planet we were weak. You didn't understand that we hadn't left because we were too busy conquering the planet we were on. Earth isn't a paradise like your homeworld. It's a death world where everything is trying to kill you. And humans are the species that won. We're the apex predators of a planet where being an apex predator actually means something." Tevrin was silent for a long time before speaking. "The Empire made another mistake too. We thought technology was everything. We never considered that. Determination, I think you call it, could overcome a technological advantage. Technology matters," Kate acknowledged. "But it's not everything. A human with a simple rifle and the will to fight is more dangerous than an alien with an energy weapon who doesn't really want to be there, and every human on Earth was willing to fight. Not because we're violent by nature, but because you threatened something we value more than our lives. Our freedom." "What happens now?" Tevrin asked. Kate smiled. "Now we build starships. Lots of them. We've seen that there are threats out there and we need to be ready. We'll explore the galaxy, we'll meet other species, and maybe we'll make friends. But we'll also make sure that no one ever thinks about attacking Earth again."